All right, so Aaron asked me a question, a few weeks ago. He's like, hey, do you ever go back through some old sermons and pull out the notes and have these old sermons pulled out? I'm like, no, I don't. No, I don't. My pastor had files, and he would pull out the same file every summer and teach the same thing every single summer. I would never do that. And so I have never gone back and retaught a previous sermon before until today. And I'm not saying I'm going to teach a previous one, but 17 years ago, Abby and I and Aaron were all here together 17 years ago, and we started with Crossroads down here. And I started Abby was already on staff before then, and then I came on staff in February, and then Aaron came on staff in May. And for a year with Crossroads, we taught one passage for a year. And you want to talk about beating a passage to death and kicking the dead thing. And after about 6-9 months, we were like, oh my gosh, I don't want to talk about this passage ever again, right? But one of the things that I remember of that passage is that from that point forward, my perspective or my glasses that I wore, everything that I wore really stemmed from that passage, because I turned that passage over and over and over and over so many times, and I saw it in the Greek, and I saw it in the Hebrew, and all of these different things, that it made an imprint on my heart so much that it's almost like every time I open the Scripture, there's a theme that my heart sees, that my eyes read, and probably you hear in my teachings from this verse. And as we get ready to move into the building over here, as we get ready to move to reopen the gathering, which is weeks away, I thought, you know what, maybe this should be something that I should talk about again, because it was so impactful for me, and I believe that it's so impactful for this entire parish that we all need to hear this message, and for a few weeks kind of focus on this. And so I want everybody to turn to Galatians chapter 5, verse 16. Aaron, you have this memorized, right? Galatians 5:16. And this is a passage that, like I said, I've heard in sermons so many different ways. But because I looked it up and studied it for so long, I can only see it in one perspective now. But I think it's powerful. So 5:16, who wants to read that? Go.
I say walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh.
Say walk by the Spirit. Walk by the Spirit. There's so many ways that we can think about that, but how many times have you heard somebody say that to walk is a Hebrew idiom? It's an idiom that would be used it's raining cats and dogs. It has a meaning in the culture and in the language in which it was used. And it means it's not just about walking, it's not the song, by Aerosmith. It is the idea that literally when you hear the word walk, it is to conform, to change to a particular way of living. This is how I live. It's not just maybe the things that I think about or the words that I use. It's literally the actions of my lifestyle. Paul says to conform to this way of living. And what way of living would he potentially be talking about? What walk, what conformity would he potentially be alluding to or pointing to? There's a certain way to live. Where does he get that idea from? What is the Torah? What is another way? The Torah is the Hebrew word, but what does it mean in English? Instructions. How many of you guys love to read instructions? Anybody? What? Yeah, Alex does. How many of you have ever read the instructions to this thing? Anybody? Nobody. If we have to, right? What would happen if we actually, does anybody know how much your phone can actually do? I mean, it's amazing, right? And there's so many things on here that my son or one of my sons will tell me, Dad, you just need to do this. Or sometimes it's just a simple thing. You just swipe this way or that way, and it changes the screen. Like, for years, I probably had this phone, and I didn't know the simplest tasks it could do. Imagine what would happen if I learned the instructions of all this, how powerful this thing would be in my hands. Do you guys agree? I mean, we could use this thing so much more than, it's got the computer, the CPU of like massive computers that we used to have in the 60s and 70s. And just this little itty-bitty, tiny thing. The things that are powerful that we only use a fraction of. Instead, I just use it for text messages and pictures and phone calls. And sometimes I look at Reels, right? You look at Reels too, right? I know you're a TikTok guy. You like TikTok. Yeah. See, I like the Reels. So what Paul is about to tell us is that there's a certain way to live. And there's something inside of us that is waging a war in us. Somebody read 5:17.
For the flesh desires what is contrary to the spirit, and the spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want.
Right. So there's this war taking place inside each and every one of us. There's this waging war that's taking place, and in the culture of the day, and still this belief is today, we find these two words that define this war. They say in every human being you have what's called the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer HaTov. The Yetzer Hara is the evil inclination. This inclination that leads us to evil. Some other people would define it a little bit differently. In the English, we call it what, Dawn? You're what? For you Marvel fans, right? Star-Lord's dad is what? What's his name? Ego, right? The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, in a lot of other vernaculars and terms, is what we call ego, right? What is your ego? What is your ego? Anybody define it? Yeah? Yeah, ego is that self-centered, immediate gratification. I have to have it now, all about me, part of every one of our personality. Every one of you has the evil inclination. Every one of you has an ego. We're born with it. You have it no matter what. And that ego, that evil inclination, is driven towards things like pleasure or property or security. And if left unchecked, that leads us to evil. The evil inclination or the ego is kind of like mud on a windshield, right? If there's mud on front of your front windshield, like, can you see where you're going? Can you see what step to take? As well as the ego a lot of times speaks in first person. Have you ever noticed that? If they get the recognition and not me, nobody will respect me. If I can't do this presentation well, I'm going to look like an idiot, so why do I even try? I'm going to have just one more piece of cake. I deserve it. I need it. Or maybe it's, what's the harm? So what if I look at this website? Nobody's going to know. It's not like I'm cheating or anything. The Yetzer Hara, the ego, in each and every one also has, or I should say lacks, maybe has none, empathy, compassion towards other people. It only looks out for itself. It puts me before other people's feelings, other people's needs, and it's always present when we're stressed, when we're frustrated, when we're insecure, when I'm nervous about what I'm supposed to do. And if you look back in your own life and you look back at all of those stupid, dumb mistakes or those stupid comments that you made or the things that you like, why did I do that? Your ego was right there with you the whole time. that Yetzer Hara was walking with you and telling you, yeah, absolutely you should do this. Why not do this? Forming the decisions that you are making and the thoughts of where you should go. It was interesting as I was looking at this, and I forgot this, and that's why I love coming back to this passage, is that the root word for Yetzer Hara, comes from a Hebrew word called zior. Zior means to form something, to create something, to build something. The Yetzer Hara, whether it be the Hatov or the Hara, takes the raw materials in each and every one of you. The raw materials like passion, desire, pleasure. Are those good or bad? They're neutral, right? Passion can be a really good thing. It can also be a really, really bad thing. It depends on, does your ego control passion? Or does the good inclination take hold of that and guide it and control it? What happens when our ego, the Yetzer Hara, reigns supreme in our life and it controls every action and decision that we make? What happens to us? What happens to communities? What happens to society when everyone's ego reigns supreme? This is something that has taken place for millennia. Who just read? Keep reading, 19 through 21. What does it say? This is what happens when your ego takes control. Yes, sir.
Now the works of the flesh are evident: sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity, strife, jealousy, fits of anger, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness, orgies, and things like these. I warn you, as I warned you before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God.
Man, it's a good thing we don't have those problems anymore. It's good problems. We don't suffer with any of that stuff anymore. I mean, it's a good thing when I turn on the TV and I'm watching the news that I never see anything about sexual depravity. I never see anything about anger or rage that's happening. I never see uncontrolled pleasure or debauchery. I don't see murder, I don't ever see anything about murder happening around us, right? We are completely safe where we live. And slander, lies, never have to worry about that unless you watch the news. Divisions, selfishness. Man, it was rampant in Paul's day. It is no different today. These are the things that we struggle with. And Paul says, walk. Conform your life to the Spirit. Be formed, be shaped, be molded by the Spirit. The Yetzer Hatov is that good spirit, the good inclination is what we need to form these passions and desires and move them in the right direction. The Yetzer Hara is to shape, to mold us, to become great, to become good, to become holy. That's its role. But the question that a lot of times we struggle with is, how do we even do that? How do we walk by the Spirit? And this is one of the things that I found new as I was studying this. There's two things that we have to do to recognize the evil of the ego and the evil of the inclination. First, we have to realize that the ego is just an illusion. It's not real. The Talmud talks about ego as though a man standing in front of you with a chainsaw. Right? If you know that movie, you might be a little scared, right? A man standing in front of you with a chainsaw, it's loud and it's roaring, and what do? And the fool, in the Talmud says, the fool turns and he runs right away because he sees the chainsaw and he's scared. But the wise man observes the situation and recognizes the man with the chainsaw has no feet. He's stationary. He's locked to the ground. So he just goes around. It's not even a worry for me. But the evil inclination, the ego, takes over and we run. because I think about me first and foremost, and I go. Your ego is fake. It's something that we have to see through. It's like mud on the windshield wipers. Just wash it off. It's not stuck there. Turn your windshield wipers on. Spray it off with a hose. It's just a mirage. We have to find, the second thing we have to do is we have to find and recognize that there's clarity when we ask simple questions. Is this my ego speaking? Am I listening to my ego try to convince me of something that I probably shouldn't be doing? And here's a lot of times how you can tell, especially when you're working on a team or with a group or a community, is the decision you're about to make one that benefits you or the team that you're on? Is the decision that you're about to make when times are tough or when there's a problem or there's something that breaks, is your first decision, it's Bruce's fault? It's not mine. Or maybe you have to ask the question, I did this. I want the recognition. Why aren't you guys telling me that? What is Philippians? Here, I'll read this. Philippians 2:12. This is a passage that I didn't put on the board, but I want to read this. And you probably have heard me say this before. It says this. Paul says this to another community. He says, "So that, my beloved, as you always obeyed, not only in my presence, but now much rather in my absence, work out your own salvation with fear and trembling." What does that mean to work out your salvation? Work out your salvation. Well, I thought I already had salvation. What do you mean I need to work out my salvation? What possibly could Paul be talking about? How many of you guys work out in here? You worked out today. You went to the gym. You went rock climbing, right? Why do you work out? Okay. What else? Who else works out? To not be fat. Yeah. Any other reasons you work out? Feel good? To train for something? Yeah. To get stronger, right? There's a purpose behind this, right? I don't just work out to work out. Nobody really does that. There's a reason why I work out. There's a goal that I'm trying to achieve. And here's the thing about working out. If you work out and you climb the same route every single time, every single day, what happens? What? Not only tired, what else would happen to your muscles? What? Okay. What? You plateau. You don't get stronger. Your muscles actually stop growing and they just stay the way that they are because it just does the same thing over and over and over. You plateau. You never grow anymore. And the thing about working out, if you lift weights, Abby lifts weights now, right? There's this whole idea of something that if you want to get stronger, continue to get stronger, continue to become a better rock climber, you have to do what's called progressive overload. Have you heard that before? What does that mean? You keep adding weight. You keep pushing yourself further. You keep doing harder and more challenging stuff. Always adding more weight, just in small little increments. It doesn't have to be huge, but small little increments so that you continue to get strong, to achieve the goal, to achieve the purpose that you are trying to do. When Paul says that we are to walk in the Spirit, it is about this idea of to form a new way of living. Progressive overload isn't just for working out or when you go to the gym. It's for when you add small little increments to your life as you walk with God. Small little things that maybe you've heard in here. We've talked about these things, but you just haven't taken any action on it. How many of us in here have plateaued spiritually? I just do the same thing over and over and over. And I can do it. I got muscle memory. I can do it. But your faith is not growing. It's just meh. And you wonder why. I mean, I read every day, I pray every day. Why am I not growing? Maybe it's because you haven't added anything new to your life. What happened to your life when you started on the road of meditation?
I was going to comment that you have to have an objective, right? What is your objective?
Sure.
When you work out, you're working out to be able to run a race. So what is your objective to God?
Yeah.
Your objective
Sure.
to be one with God, right? Now, how do you achieve that?
Well, it could be one with God, but also like to be used by God.
Well, yeah, well, but that's...
Right? To be His vessel, right? So there's always this idea. So like in working out, you might have this huge goal, but each day the focus is, all right, I'm a little bit more, I'm pushing a little bit more, adding a little bit more.
But there's no doubt that He's going to use you when you will clear in your path.
Right. But my point is, you had this conversation with me. What happened after you started doing meditation to your faith?
Well, my faith just keeps growing more and more.
Right.
My closest to God grows more and more. But what I was going to say to you, it's along the line, is that ability to kind of get above the natural a little bit, okay, makes the evil inclination less and less and less. It makes it easier to walk in the Spirit.
Right. And I think for every human being in here, it's a little bit different, right? There are some people who have the inclination to go towards the mystical, but not everybody. But that doesn't mean that I don't do anything, right? For some of us, what have you done differently over the past year, 2 years, 5 years? Do you still just continue to do the same thing? Or how many of you have actually put a mezuzah up because that was new? And you made sure, like, I'm going to put this mezuzah up and I'm going to touch it every time I enter and leave my door. And that's one thing that I've added, and it's changed my thought process. We talked about time last week, adding, thankfulness and gratitude to every morning when I wake up and grabbing something, whether it be a prayer book or a book, and investing in my life and some type of meditation and some type of experience throughout the day that I meditate on this and I experience what I'm thinking about and meditating all day. Or maybe it's, let's go the hard one. Maybe it's diet. Maybe we've talked about not eating, shellfish or not eating pork for a long time. You're like, I'm not doing that. But maybe that's that one little thing that maybe I should just try this one thing. Maybe I should just do this one thing and just see how it goes. Or maybe the Sabbath. What if we took the Sabbath seriously and said, look, we're going to rest on this day. We're going to hang out with God and our family, and we're going to spend time and just devoting ourselves to just taking a break. What if we just added one little thing this year to my life to change my life instead of, well, I've been doing this forever. That's all I need to do. What is the one thing that you can change to progressively overload your faith, to get stronger, to get better? No. Women aren't allowed to speak in the church. You know that.
I mean, I'm thinking about, the last few years, and I've definitely struggled with feeling like we plateau.
Sure.
But I also think that, and definitely, there are things that we can do, like all the things that you're talking about, possibly meditating. Maybe I need to be in the scriptures more. Maybe I need to be on my knees more. Maybe I need to be in the Word, or discussing a book more with some people, some others around me, any of those things.
Mm-hmm.
But I think one thing that really can, when you talk about progressive overload hurts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, the soreness afterwards, absolutely.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
if you're going to use the idea of lifting weights, you're breaking down, you're tearing
Sure.
your muscle so that it will build up stronger.
Right.
And if we apply that to our life and the experiences that we have in life, it's that tension and it's those hard things in life that oftentimes hurt,
Mm-hmm.
that will oftentimes take us to the next level, And so I think that part of that new way of living is when we hit those walls, when we hit those hard places, those hurting places, do we do what we've been meditating about? Do we do what we've been reading scriptures about? Do we Do we just ignore that? Or do we lean more into God? Do we lean more into the relationship that I have with Him? Because it's the only thing that can help me through this. It's the only thing that can take me. And sometimes, I think, like in my life, I think that's definitely something that pushes me.
I think that's, but there's also danger in what you said, because when you said, well, it's only God who can get me through these things. And when we allow our ego and the evil inclination to tell us it's okay to quit, is that a lack of God then? But you said it's hard, and so like when it's hard, what do most people do when it's hard? They quit.
Well, sure.
They don't keep going forward.
Just like things like your marriage.
Yeah.
You don't quit your marriage, so you keep pushing harder.
Sure. You keep pushing harder. That's my point. Like God has given you everything that you need, right? And He's there and He's going to support you, but that's where that war is waging in you. Because that waging war is going to be like, don't give in to your husband. He's wrong. Right? Don't submit to him, or he needs to be humble first. Or why do I keep doing this? Like when does the ego, remember it speaks in first person. Why do I need to keep doing this? And that's your ego. That's the evil inclination you telling you, it's okay to quit. Where it takes the Yetzer HaTov takes discipline, right? Discipline is hard. Who wants to get up at 6 in the morning, 5:30 in the morning to go work out when that's your only time to go work out? Who wants to do that? Only the disciplined person. Only the disciplined person who says, you know what, I'm getting up at 4:30 and I'm going to read, and I'm going to study, and I'm going to pray because this is important. Because the Yetzer Hara says, man, hit the snooze button. I'm tired. You can do that tomorrow. If we are wanting to build a house that is holy as a community, we have to recognize that there's a war inside each and every one of us waging, saying, you don't need to do that. But Paul is telling you, no, you can. The Yetzer Hara, the Yetzer HaTov is saying, come, this is what God says is good. You have the choice. Follow what God says is good. It's your choice. One of the most important things I've ever learned is that the power to change something comes from the power to choose. You want to change your life? You want to change your marriage? You want to change what's going on around you? You have the power to choose the decisions you make. God's given us the book. He's given us the instructions. We just have to choose to do them. And He works through us when we do that. When we choose to follow our ego, as he said, the desires, the passions, all that stuff, if we choose to go with this leads in its own direction. But if you follow this direction, there's a lot of promises here. There's a lot of blessing here. There's a lot of fruit that takes place here. The question is, what choices are we willing to make? We're going to continue this passage next week, but so I say walk by the Spirit takes discipline. Discipline is hard. It takes perseverance. Perseverance is hard. But the benefits that come from that are holy and good. I'm going to ask Kristen to come up and finish this, but I want to pray as we just think about that. Because discipline is a hard thing. But as I looked at this passage this week and recognized the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, and the ego that wages in me every single day, God has given us a way out of that. God has promised us a new way to live. But we have to choose that. You have the power to choose that, each and every one of you. The question is, do you believe that? Father, I thank you for an opportunity to just be reminded how hard it can sometimes be, how deceptive that war is taking place inside each and every one of us. Forgive me for when my ego speaks so loud that I can't see anything else. Forgive me for when I choose something that is based solely on what my ego wants, my evil inclination is leaning towards. I pray, Father, for redemption. I pray that you can cleanse me of these decisions. Wash the mud from my eyes. Help me to be wise as I come across and confront my ego and recognize that it is false and just a mirage. Prepare my heart for what you are about to present me with, that I may be strong and disciplined, and that I desire to choose you. I desire to choose your instruction, and desire to be one with you. I praise your holy name. Amen.